This week, we sit down with the commander who led the massive manhunt for the two killers who escaped from Dannemora.
The inspiration for me to write the book was the entire 23-day incident. It captured, not only regional but national attention.
Major Charles Guest talks about his new book that tells the story of the prison break and the largest manhunt in the state's history, and his new job advising Ben Stiller and the producers of the Showtime miniseries. Also this week, state police commemorate 100 years of serving and protecting communities across northern New York. And then later, ballet dancers leave the concrete of Manhattan to reach the top of Whiteface Mountain.
Realizing that you're just this tiny, tiny speck on this amazing, amazing piece of earth.
Hello everyone and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Howie. This week, the state police commander in charge of the massive manhunt for the two convicted killers who broke out of the prison here in Dannemora 2 years ago has written a new book that tells the behind-the-scenes story of the escape and what would become the largest manhunt in New York State history.
Your Honor, I would wear an ankle bracelet and county jail for the rest of my life if I could just go home to my family.
2 years ago this week, a tailor shop seamstress at Clinton Correctional, Joyce Mitchell, was sentenced for smuggling in hacksaw blades and other tools used by inmates David Sweat and Richard Matt to saw and chisel their way out of their cells and through walls and steam pipes underground to this manhole outside the prison in the village of Dannemora. Their escape, the first in more than a century from this maximum security prison, triggered a massive manhunt.
These are very dangerous individuals. We're leaving no stone unturned.
And he was right. 21 days after breaking out of prison, Richard Matt was shot and killed by a member of this elite border tactical team in woods about 10 miles south of Malone. And then 2 days later, David Sweat was shot and captured by State Police Sergeant Jay Cook just 2 miles from the Canadian border.
Today ends with good news. These were really dangerous, dangerous men, both Matt and Sweat. They were killers.
And the incident commander in charge of the manhunt, former Troop B Commander Major Charles Guest, joins us now. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Tom. Good to see you.
We say former because you retired from the New York State Police last year in 2016, about a year after the manhunt.
That's right. I had about 20 months in command of Troop B, and 1 year after the manhunt I retired.
And since then, you have written a new book about the escape and the 3-week manhunt that you oversaw. At first, did you have really no intention of writing a book?
Yeah, it wasn't my first thought. To steal the phrase, I thought I'd ride off into the sunset quietly in retirement, as a lot of troopers prefer to do. But it's a very compelling story, the incident itself. And, the inspiration for me to write the book was the entire 23-day incident. It captured, not only regional but national attention. And there is some and sometimes disinformation out there about the event, and I thought, at least from my point of view, I could tell this story, and my wife encouraged me to do so. She had said, if you don't write this book, someone else will. You'll pick it up and read it and say, that's not the way it happened. So, that's all it took for me to buckle down.
So you sort of hope to set the record straight when it comes to a few things?
Yes, correct.
What in particular?
Well, for one thing, it's maybe an American trait to kind of paint with a broad brush sometimes when we look at an incident. And by that I mean, there's no question that a handful of actors within the corrections system facilitated, some of them criminally, facilitated the escape of Matt and Sweat. But by no means does the Department of Corrections, and I'm not a DOCS employee, I'm a state trooper, but by no means does the Department of Corrections deserve the broad brush systemically that they got painted with. And I can speak to that because literally thousands of their employees worked diligently and around the clock to assist law enforcement and our partners in apprehending them.
How daunting was that, being the incident commander, having to not only worry about the law enforcement personnel out there searching for these two, but also the communities and keeping people safe?
Yes, it was an enormous task, and it truly kept me up at night. That's the, I understand intuitively now what that phrase really means, because I felt an overwhelming responsibility not only for the safety of our first responders and our law enforcement personnel, but of the community members themselves. I mean, I've spoken to a number of them since the event, and they all have the same general message. They felt terrorized during this incident because truly these two gentlemen were the worst of the worst. No one knew where they were or what they were capable of doing. And we knew they would become increasingly desperate as time went on. I was concerned that one of our small fleet of aircraft could auger into a mountain if they're unfamiliar with the terrain up here and have a tactical team on board, that there could have been a friendly fire confrontation between either law enforcement personnel or law enforcement and civilians who were, properly arming themselves out of their own safety concerns.
Were you amazed, really, that no one was hurt?
Yes, to put it mildly, I think it's a small miracle. I think someone was watching out for us.
As the search was going on, about 2 weeks in, you write in the book that you had noticed that there was fatigue. You noticed that the morale was waning a little, and that was on Saturday, June 23rd of 2015. And that's the day that the break came. And would you call that the biggest break in the manhunt, when Corrections Officer John Stockwell he took your message to heart. He went and checked on a hunting cabin, a camp over near Mountain View and Owl's Head, and saw Matt and Sweat leaving the cabin, and that was that the big break that you had been waiting for?
That was the big break. If there ever is a term for that, that was it. Motivation was waning, doubt was beginning to creep into even the responders who have been coming from around the state and some from around the country with the federal agencies. And that's largely because we had no specific leads that had developed into anything, although we'd had probably 12 to 1,300 leads by that point out of the 3,400 that we investigated in total. None of them panned out, although we ran each one to ground. And so the media had picked up early on, and they had the talking heads and the experts on a variety of national and local stations that said, these guys are in Mexico or Canada by now. And that has an impact both on the public. It starts to shake the confidence of the public a bit, and it has an impact on law enforcement personnel. And my concern was they may become complacent in their duties and thus let their guard down ever so much, either allowing the inmates to truly escape the region, or worse, having a safety issue during the course of their patrols. And so when John Stockwell went out to his camp in Twisted Horn, had armed himself to check his cabin that day, and reported back to the State Police Command Post that he believed he saw one or two people scurry off the back deck. And we responded in force at that location. Were able to clear the area. Unfortunately, did not apprehend them at that site, but recovered a treasure trove and variety of items, evidentiary items, clothing, toothbrush, shaving kit, etc., bottles of water, you name it, that they dropped in their haste to leave Twisted Horn. And within a record short amount of time, within the state police, about 13 hours, we had confirmatory DNA that both subjects had actually been at that location. And you cannot overstate the importance of that DNA hit, because it truly pumped up the entire force.
6 days later, Jay Cook was out on patrol. Sergeant Jay Cook from Troop B out of Malone was out on patrol up in the Constable area, and that's when he sighted David Sweat and chased after him, sprinted after him across the field, and then took 2 shots from 50 yards and took him down. And you write that in the book there's a whole chapter on Jay Cook and what he did, and you really marvel at his ability to stop him from getting to the Canadian border.
Yes, truly. Jay Cook was the right man at the right place at the right time.
It's hard to hear radio traffic. This is a remote area, and so it's very spotty. So you didn't hear it as it was happening. But when you got the call and got the word that Sweat had been stopped, captured, what was your reaction?
Well, immense relief, to be perfectly honest with you, that it was over. And at some point when I was racing my troop car to Malone to meet up with Sergeant Cook to see him personally, get a quick debriefing, make sure he was okay, somewhere I thought to myself, it was a storybook ending to a long 23 days, and that had anybody bothered to in the future write a script for Hollywood, you know, and say that all of these events from day 1 to day 23 transpired, and a single New York State trooper is the one responsible for ending it in that fashion, I think Hollywood would have balked at that and sent it back to them in the mail, you know. But in fact, you know, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
You mentioned Hollywood. Right now, you're an advisor to Ben Stiller, an advisor to a miniseries for Showtime that's going to come out sometime next year. And you're working as a technical advisor to the project?
That's right, a law enforcement technical advisor.
How did you get involved with the project?
Well, at some point, they had heard that not only did the former major or incident commander for that escape retire from the state police and was now available, but that I had also written a book, or was writing a book, about this subject matter. So one of his production assistants reached out to me and asked if I would consider, they were on a scouting mission in Malone, and asked if I would consider this past June coming up and meeting Mr. Stiller. And I was enormously impressed with his desire to get it right, you know, to portray what I have discussed as the very salient moments of the operations. You know, Sergeant Cook and his effort in the Bortak takedown of Richard Matt, and how, you know, the community and corrections and law enforcement came together under very difficult circumstances. I thought that story needed to be told as much, if not more, than the relationships in the prison that allowed this escape to occur.
You also have an on-screen role.
I do.
Do you play yourself?
I do play myself. That was unexpected. That came along some weeks after I had been advising. And there was a direct request from Mr. Stiller, hey, would you mind playing yourself in this thing? And I kind of blushed a little bit at the thought of that, but he said, who else are we going to get with a haircut like that can play you? So I agreed, and you know, in relatively short order, they put me back in a state police uniform and took us all out for the day to Route 30, where we had to recreate that one segment. And I will admit to you, it was quite surreal, you know, when they had literally a helicopter land in the middle of Route 30 and a tactical team get off, and cars racing into position, you know, before you know it, it kind of reminded me of 2015 all over again.
It had to be weird experiencing that way.
It was.
You can hear more about the making of the miniseries on the escape and manhunt, and whether major guests would have done anything differently, as our conversation continues online at mountainlake.org. You can also go online to see where you can buy a copy of the book and see what bookstores are selling it locally. We take it for granted today, but a century ago, small rural communities like here in Dannemora often had no police protection. That changed 100 years ago with the formation of the New York State Police. And in the Tri-Lakes this past weekend, the state police held an open house to showcase their history and commemorate a century of service and commitment. Our Jack LeDuc has more.
Long before the open house, volunteer troopers were busy placing commemorative markers with the names of living and deceased troopers along with their wives' names. The pavers will serve as a permanent reminder of the troopers who served the area. When the open house got underway Saturday morning, it was estimated that as many as 3,000 attended it throughout the day.
We have something here for absolutely everybody today. We have bouncy houses for the kids. We've got barbecue. We've got great shows that are going to be put on by our aviation and our special operations response team, our canine unit, our underwater recovery team, commercial vehicle enforcement unit.
Trooper Fleischman said that they wanted to honor one of the finest police agencies in the country. They also wanted to honor the members who came before them and made it as great a police force as it is today.
This agency was founded by two women who found the need for a police agency to take care of the rural areas, to police the rural areas of New York State. And that is how the New York State Police began.
We started planning this event in June of 2014. We had our first meeting down in Albany to celebrate it statewide and to see what we were going to do. And after that, we started planning our celebration here on what we were going to have. And the event is pretty much standardized throughout the state of the things that we're going to show and the people that we're going to have here.
There is plenty to see here Saturday, like this new mobile communications vehicle. It was used recently in a search for a lost hiker. It will also be shared with 3 other troops. Meeting terrorist attacks ranks high on the state police agenda. Their sophisticated bomb unit was in full operation for the public to see.
So now the robot has brought the bomb to a safe, wide-open area where there's no people around.
Sometimes a live person in a protective suit is brought in.
This is Trooper Ramos. He works all over the troop. He is a bomb technician, and his job is a job that none of us want.
On Saturday, Trooper Ramos called for a young assistant to help him. The payoff came with a toy for aiding to defuse the bomb. These are bomb detection robots, and they can safely remove a bomb. But when it comes to chasing down a criminal, they bring in the dogs. The canines cost about $10,000 each and are paid for by individual donations.
A lot of these dogs are from Europe, and they have great working dog bloodlines, and they turn out to be much better working dogs. If a dog has to bite somebody in a situation that requires a canine apprehension, our intent is never for the person to get seriously injured. It's just to be apprehended, and as soon as the person is in custody, the dog's immediately removed.
Saturday's audience got a close-up look at the trained dogs in all-out action. Each dog wore a bite-proof muzzle. The Special Operations Response Team, or SORT, dangled in the air, rappelling onto the roof, adding more excitement for the spectators. But it was not all about modern technology. This is a 1946 Ford. It had a 100-horsepower engine in it, a far cry from the 370 horsepower that the state police have in their cars today. Troop Commander John Tebbets summed up the anniversary celebration by saying that he was glad to see the public come in and touch the long history of the state police that has made them the proud agency they are today. For Mountain Lake Journal, I'm Jack LeDuc in Ray Brook.